Well, remember the scene at the end of the movie The Candidate after Robert Redford wins the election? He looks at Peter Boyle and he says, "What do we do now? Life imitating art." I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, well, remember Dewey defeats Truman? Well, multiply that by 1,000. A stunning upset in the presidential election. Even though Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, Donald Trump wins a decisive victory in the Electoral College, becoming the nation's 45th president. And here in Wisconsin, another stunning upset in Wisconsin's Senate race as Ron Johnson defeats former Senator Russ Feingold. Paul Ryan maintains his majority in the House. Republicans hold the U.S. Senate, and the GOP increases its majority in both houses of the Wisconsin state legislature. The reactions, well, a gracious meeting in the White House between the Trumps and the Obamas, but protesters took to the streets to protest the election results. But let's start with the results right here in Wisconsin. Donald Trump won the Badger State, the first Republican to win here since 1984. He got roughly the same number of votes as Mitt Romney 4 years ago, but Hillary Clinton got 238,000 fewer votes than Obama got. Look at these numbers. Obama back in 2008 got about 1.7 million. Obama in 2012 got about 1.6. Hillary Clinton 2016, 1,382,000 votes. Meanwhile, Trump seems to have actually gotten fewer votes than Mitt Romney, who lost Wisconsin by 7 points 4 years ago. Romney got 1.4 million, 1,410,000. Trump 1,409,000. Now, turnout was down across the state, but especially in Milwaukee. Hillary Clinton got roughly 40,000 fewer votes in Milwaukee County than Obama got here 4 years ago. Meanwhile, Trump ran up big margins outstate, including the Green Bay area. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, the president of Edge Messaging, Brian Fraley, defense attorney Dan Adams, and research fellow at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, Colin Roth. How and why did Donald Trump win Wisconsin, which nobody saw coming, including me?
There was a huge drop-off in the Democratic turnout, as you mentioned, with the Milwaukee numbers, and the other aspect was that there are Obama-Trump voters out there. I think Craig Gilbert of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel posted a map. There are 17 counties in the state of Wisconsin that voted for Obama twice, voted for Walker 3 times, and voted for Donald Trump last Tuesday. Those are real swing voters.
Yeah, I mean, obviously one of the stories is what happened to the vote in Milwaukee, Michael Holt.
Well, there was a lot of different factors. The black vote was down.
Way down.
You know, according to the League of Women Voters, there were a lot of problems at the polls dealing with voter ID. I wouldn't say that was the primary reason. But Hillary ran a bad campaign. Let's face it. She didn't come back to Wisconsin after the primaries. She did a horrendous job in trying to generate, you know, and energize the black vote. She spent her money in the wrong places, and she did something that Democrats are known for. They took the black vote for granted. If she could have got Obama numbers, she would have been over the hump.
Okay, so Brian Fraley, I mean, how big a mistake was that Hillary Clinton never came back here after?
It was a huge mistake. Yeah. First, credit where credit is due. Trump won the presidency. And won Wisconsin, two things that I did not predict he would do.
Well,
so I'll eat crow here.
And he broke that blue wall through the Great Lakes states.
But if you would have told me that he would have received the number of votes he received in Wisconsin, I would have said, oh, wow, he lost by about 4 points.
Yeah. Okay, so why were the polls so wrong here in Wisconsin?
The polls weren't that wrong, really. They were close on the U.S. Senate race. It was, you know, within the margin of error. And on the Senate or the presidential race, I think the modeling was wrong in terms of African American turnout. And older women turnout did not rally around Hillary. They weren't passionate for her the way they thought.
Okay, this surprised everybody, but it had to be absolutely devastating for Democrats who not only thought they were going to win the presidency, but probably thought they were going to win up and down. What went wrong from your point of view?
I think there's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not one thing that you can point to, but I will say this. There was a palpable lack of urgency. I think a lot of Democrats and more moderate people said there's absolutely no way my neighbors would vote for this guy, really discounting what the poll numbers and really what reality was telling them, which was you have to motivate, you have to get your neighbors out. I made a big point last week about talking about how great we were doing in early voting.
Yeah.
I actually think that that has flipped against us, in that the most enthused voters weren't enthused on Election Day and pulling their neighbors out to go vote with them, their kids, their roommates. They checked the box and thought that we're done. And then 2 weeks later, Election Day comes.
Well, if I had to...
There was also a gap between, for example, there was a gap between black folks who voted for Senate and black folks who voted for president.
We're going to get to the Senate. I mean, obviously, if I had to point to one big thing about the presidential election, nationally, it was that this was a change election. This was a change election, and Hillary Clinton was the status quo candidate. She thought that she didn't need to provide any sort of a rationale, any sort of a vision, that she should simply run against Donald Trump. And I think a lot of pundits, and I put myself in this category, just could not conceive Donald Trump being elected, and therefore, because we did not think it was possible, we told one another, and we told the public that it was impossible. Both parties, I think, actually believed that. So that in the end, Hillary Clinton figured all she needed to do was sit back and tell people all the terrible things that Donald Trump did. Now, what's very interesting is that Donald Trump's image is still extremely negative, but when it came down to it, it was this rebellion against the status quo, this rebellion against the elitism, the condescension, the corruption, and obviously that email issue hurt her, all of the Clinton baggage. And, I know that there's going to be divisions in the Republican Party, but there's got to be a reckoning on the Democratic Party. I mean, you not only have, lost the presidency, but, to have lost the Senate as well, to have picked up only a handful of seats in the House of Representatives. And you look at state legislatures, the Republicans now control more houses in state legislatures around the country than they ever have in American political history. What has your glass half full? What is your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. We'll start with you, Michael Holt.
Well, my glass is half full because 4 more states legalized marijuana Tuesday. And now half the states allow for medical use of the drug. My glass is half empty because you're probably going to need a joint on a regular basis to survive the next 4 years. And unfortunately, it's still illegal in Wisconsin.
Brian Fraley.
My glass is half full because Wisconsin is now a red, not a purple state. It's half empty because I fear we may all learn the wrong lessons from Trump's victory.
Okay, Dan Adams.
My glass is half full because voters elected 3 Democratic women superstars to the U.S. Senate. Catherine Cortez Masto, Kamala Harris, and Maggie Hassan each are extremely impressive. My glass is half empty because nationwide there's been a huge depletion of Democrats in state offices. Just look at Wisconsin, where the state assembly and state senate went from bad to worse. It's hard to build for the future when you have no bench to build from.
Colin Roth.
Donald Trump is the embodiment of this feature. He's half full because he won and has the opportunity to govern and enact positive pro-growth reforms. He's half empty because he simply cannot govern the way he campaigned without tearing this country apart.
Well, my glass is half empty because this was one of the nastiest, most divisive campaigns in political history. It's half full because President Obama and Donald Trump were able to put that behind them for a short time at least, a small win for civility. Our Sunday Insight Countdown shows the lame duck session of Congress begins tomorrow. Donald Trump takes the oath of office in 68 days, and we are just 723 days away from the midterm election.
Come on.
And here's one more thought. If these two guys can shake hands and say nice things about each other, maybe some of their supporters and opponents should consider doing the same thing. Nah. The future First Lady and the current First Lady are said to have also had a good first meeting, sharing thoughts about raising kids in the White House. The president-elect says his wife really likes Michelle Obama. We'll be right back. Just months ago, he was written off as a sure loser, and as recently as August, Senator Ron Johnson trailed former Senator Russ Feingold by double digits in the polls. National pundits wrote him off, and even his own party pulled support. But last Tuesday, in one of the biggest upsets in the country, Ron Johnson won re-election decisively, beating Feingold by 3 points and running about 70,000 votes ahead of Trump at the top of the ticket. Okay, what happened? How did he do that? Brian Fraley.
First of all,
Yeah.
it feels really good.
Yeah.
And, somebody said, well, you must be feeling really bad about the election with Trump. And I said, look, I went into election night hoping 3 things would happen. That Russ Feingold, Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump would lose. I got 2 of 3. I'll take it. And especially this race. Ron Johnson did everything right after Labor Day. His ads were spot on. Grandpa getting peed on, very funny.
Yeah.
The fireside chat thing, really good. Feingold's ads were creepy. They were mean-spirited and just just tone deaf.
You know, Dan, I want to point out that you got a lot of crap when probably a year ago you were pointing out that maybe it was not a great idea for the Democrats to bring back a retread, and
nobody listened.
Yeah.
Nobody listened.
But Ross Feingold thought this was his seat, though, right? I mean, he was absolutely sure
he was entitled to the seat,
right.
And as a product of that, he ran a generic, off-the-rack, passionless, crappy campaign, a very conventional campaign. Where he said, "Give me my seat back." Essentially, he didn't come to Sherman Park after we had that episode this summer. He didn't talk to any type of Democratic kind of outside of his worldview of Dane County progressivism with people who would fet him every time he came to one of their meetings. He just ran this miserable campaign. It was completely predictable.
It was very unlike his old campaigns.
It was completely different from 1992.
Okay.
We need a better bench.
What happened there?
Yeah, something I thought of was just how hard Ron Johnson worked. You think about the last week or two, he barnstormed the state with both Scott Walker and Paul Ryan. He was everywhere. He had a lot to say. He was talking about his record. And ultimately, when you look at the vote totals, I mean, he outdid Donald Trump, and he did very, very well in these wild counties, suburban Milwaukee. He did what he needed to do.
Well, you're right when you talk about Feingold running an off-the-rack campaign. Ron Johnson did not. It was a very distinctive campaign. Whether you want to talk about the whiteboard campaign or the ads that humanized him about how he helped.
Campaign.
Well, the diaper ad I thought was brilliant, but also, talking about the Joseph Project
and
was a big thing, or how he helped that family adopt that young woman. I mean, he changed his image in a very, very short period of time, and once people got to know him, he ran in a lot of ways the kind of campaign that Ross Feingold used to run.
Yeah, and he humanized himself, as you said, but he also introduced himself. He actually ran as the outsider, but he's been there for 6 years. It was really kind of amazing. But the Joseph Project really resonated in the black community. And I hear that he might have got like 12% of the black vote. He had black people in his commercials, and they were talking about, "I'm employed, I'm proud."
I know. They were very
and
good.
as I said a couple of weeks ago, that totally backfired on Feingold, because he said it was not a good project. It was not good to give these black people jobs. It's ridiculous.
I think that there was a turning point in this campaign. I think when the National Republican Party, the Senate committee, pulled their money from him because they thought that he was done, it was kind of liberating for him. And basically, it was like, I'm going to run my own campaign. He got involved in it and did in fact turn it around. But the Russ Feingold campaign still sticks with me because it was so badly done. And he was known for having clever ads. And as I mentioned to you guys before the show, I actually went to school with Steve Eichenbaum. And Steve Eichenbaum was the creative genius behind Russ Feingold's previous campaigns. And he died much too young, died suddenly. And apparently Russ Feingold was never able to find somebody who could do the kind of work that Steve Eichenbaum did. Because what I think we saw was the genuine, real Russ Feingold, not the one that we'd seen before. You may not want to hear, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, mine is to the thousands of demonstrators around the country who are protesting the election and Trump's agenda. Save your energy. You're going to be very busy over the next 4 years. 1,200 days of this stuff.
Yeah, Brian Fraley.
Hey, to my fellow deer hunters who head into the woods this Saturday, have a safe hunt, make great memories with friends and family, and good luck.
Dan Adams.
My advice is for State Assembly Minority Leader Peter Barca. Please resign and allow Corey Mason, David Bowen, or Jocasta Zamarripa to take your position. You've had your chance. Actually, chances. Now it's time for fresh leadership.
Colin Roth.
My advice is for liberals to ditch the smug condescension that led in part to Trump. Not everyone who disagrees with you is backwards and deserving of mockery and derision.
Well, Republicans are justifiably celebrating last week's big win, but here's a cautionary note. The GOP has now lost 6 of the last 7 popular votes for president, and the face of your party is now one of the most unpopular political figures in the country. Don't get cocky. Next on Sunday Inside, what can state government accomplish with Republicans increasing their majorities in both the Assembly and the Senate? In Washington, Republicans now hold the presidency, the Senate, and the House. Here in Wisconsin, Republicans managed to increase their already big majorities in the state legislature. In the Assembly, the GOP will now have 64 out of 99 seats. In the state Senate, Republicans also picked up a Senate seat, now holding at least 20 out of 33. So the question is, what is Scott Walker going to do with this majority?
That's a good question, because one of the things that
Anything
did
he
not
wants,
come out
yeah.
at the election was any type of policy procedure.
Right.
I mean, they've taken all the low-hanging fruit, all the easy, sexy stuff. Now it's the block and tackle of a balanced budget, road transportation, school accountability, things that aren't jump off the page, kind of conservative, you know, shiny objects. It's the hard stuff now.
Okay, so what do you think they're going to do?
It's important.
Yeah.
It's important stuff, and as you know,
Like
I'm
what?
working with people that want to invest in transportation,
Yeah.
build roads, and get it done right in a way that you get a decent return on investment in investing in roads. But you also have school accountability, MPS. You guys are working on stuff on licensure.
Well,
I think there's a lot to do.
what's the big bold idea? I'm not getting it.
Well, and I think what you're going to hear a lot of the three letters, ESAs.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that's coming. Education savings account. This is one of the hot new ideas in education reform. It's an individual savings account that can interrupt education.
I would think another expansion of school choice.
Well, I mean, it's going to expand on its own anyway.
Yeah.
But I think that you're going to see, and everybody's going to be shocked, it's going to create a lot of dissension. But the Assembly and the Senate are going to try to change the Milwaukee School Board.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to effectively go in there with some legislation and say that we want it to be appointed or something to that effect. And this is going to blow up. This is going to be the battle of the next decade. Watch.
Well, they will come back at that whole opportunity school district. There's no question about it. Okay, so here's the elephant in the room. Governor Scott Walker. Look, if Reince Priebus becomes chief of staff, if Mike Pence is running the transition, you know, obviously he's wired into this Trump administration. Would Scott Walker take a cabinet job?
I think he would. He says he doesn't want one.
Right, he's head of the Republican Governors Association, but they pick up the phone and
The
they say,
president calls
Secretary,
you.
Yeah, well.
How do you say no?
What do you think?
I don't know how you say no when you're president.
What do you
calls
think? What would Walker do?
Yeah, I mean,
that changes everything.
He said no on your show, and I
right.
guess I take him at his word until he changes his mind.
Okay.
Well, he has $1 million in presidential campaign debt, which he has to pay off, or run for president again, raise money to pay off. I think it's almost as likely he goes into private sector.
Oh no! I think that basically the lay of the land has changed. That either I could see him going into the cabinet. On the other hand, one of the things now Republicans in Washington might do is they might revive the whole federal system, you know, under the Constitution, where you take some of these federal programs, you turn it into block grants, you send it back to the states, you devolve power from Washington to the state governments, which make these governors much more powerful and influential. So this position as head of the Republican Governors Association, I think in normal times might be just kind of honorific, but it might be where the action is at right now. And I think that the Republican successes in Wisconsin also might change the environment for 2018 for Walker running for re-election. So what is it you do not get? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, in light of the numerous election day problems caused by voter ID requirements, I can't figure out why Republicans continue to deny the process isn't tainted. In truth, voter ID is doing exactly what they hoped it would do.
Brian.
Please.
Yeah, please.
Charlie, what I don't get is why the post-election protesters are out there. What do they hope to accomplish? Can someone just give them a hug, a juice box, and a participation trophy and be done with it?
Yeah, Dan Adams.
Well, just weeks ago, Sheriff Clark called on Trump supporters to resort to pitchforks and torches if the election didn't go their way, only to call for quelling. That's use of force, friends, to put down the anti-Trump protests this week. Hypocrite.
Colin.
What I don't get is how Democrats can possibly complain about executive power in the imperial presidency after giving Obama a pass for 8 years.
Well, that is interesting. Well, all the polls, all the pundits, including me, got last week so wrong. So what I want to know is, can you get fries with the crow that we'll all have to be eating? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you are first.
Okay, here we go. Losers this week are minorities, gays, transvestites, Muslims, Mexican Americans, physically challenged people, seniors, women seeking equal pay, unions, Democrats, students, dog catchers, poor people, dogs, veterans, obese people, liberals, Christians, Alec Baldwin, and people with small hands.
You left out Buddhists, janitors.
Short people.
Yeah.
Me.
You got some winners?
Everybody. Winner. America elected its first LGBT governor, second black female senator, first Latino senator, and first Assembly Asali American. Did I say that Hillary actually did break the glass ceiling?
Yeah, no. Brian.
All right, the biggest winner, Ron Johnson and his team, which pulled off one of the top 5 Republican victories in Wisconsin in the last 50 years. Simply outstanding. Loser, the Democratic Party. In particular, the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. It's in shambles. No message, no bench, no organization, no hope. This is what rock bottom looks like.
I think he's talking about you, Dan Adams.
My winner is Hillary Clinton, whose concession speech was a continuation of the class and dignity she showed throughout the entire campaign. My loser is also Hillary Clinton. I suppose hindsight is 20/20, but it's clear she didn't run a dynamic and exciting campaign that would turn out the Democratic base. A winning party requires new leaders and healthy competition. Her insider campaign denied Democrats a real primary, and this was the very sad result.
Colin Roth.
My winner is Paul Ryan. With Republican control of Congress and a willing partner in President-elect Donald Trump, he has the opportunity to pass major parts of his reform agenda for the first time ever. That's huge. My losers are all of us pundits and prognosticators. We got caught up in a feedback loop of conventional wisdom that got turned on its head. That's humbling, but hopefully makes us all better.
Yeah, well, first of all, I ought to mention that I am, in fact, wearing the Donald Trump tie. You see this? Did you see this? You see Donald Trump as a Trump tie, first time. Yeah, so, okay. Winner, by far the biggest winner locally was Senator Ron Johnson. Politics, like life, is not always fair. The good guys do not always win, but Johnson did, pulling off the upset of the year. Congratulations. Loser, Russ Feingold. When he parachuted back into Wisconsin, Feingold thought he was entitled to get his old seat back. The same voters who fired him again. Maybe this time he'll get the message. Thanks for joining us.